Now, I want to talk to you today about this campaign that you're launching in memory of Mike Lynch to scrap the extradition treaty between the US and the UK. Can you explain a little bit more to our viewers about that? Because there's this very, very complicated 10-year battle for Mike Lynch. I just want to hear a bit more about the detail.
Well, it goes back even further than that. The Labour government under Tony Blair, shortly after 9/11 in 2003, introduced an agreement, a treaty with the American government to accelerate extraditions, supposedly in both directions, and supposedly for terrorist offences. That was, perfectly common sense thing to do. But what's happened in the subsequent 20 years or so has been that it's been used by the American Justice Department for all sorts of non-violent commercial offences, if you like. And Mike Lynch, who died earlier this week in a tragic accident, or beginning of the week in a tragic accident, had been caught up in this. He'd sold his company, Autonomy, to Hewlett-Packard for, I think, about $11 billion. I mean, it was sold on the stock exchange. It wasn't a sort of private deal. And shortly afterwards, Autonomy decided they didn't like the price they paid for it, and they accused him of fraud. It was a bogus accusation, but he spent the last 10 years first trying to resist that accusation and then trying to resist extradition to the United States unsuccessfully. It sort of paralyzed, in many ways, much of his business life. This is probably our best businessman. The man has created more value in our economy than anybody else, and indeed any number of other people put together. A fantastic software scientist, a fantastic entrepreneur. And he was basically stuck trying to defend his freedom. And he went...
As far as I can understand, sorry, just want to get to grips with this. Your problem with the treaty is that it's sort of lopsided in favour of the US. There are far more people in Britain, British citizens, who are being extradited to the US. Is that the case? And if so, why is that the case? Why are we not just doing exactly the same thing?
Well, that is the case. I mean, partly because the Americans have a constitution which protects their citizens. But also partly because the way British law works. British law takes international treaties very seriously. It makes them superior to most other law. And so when someone like Lynch comes along, instead of being tried here in the UK, after all, the company was a UK company. It was built up in the UK, it was sold in the UK, it was bought by a European offshoot of Hewlett-Packard. Instead of being tried here properly, they did it in the States, and they insisted on it. And it's not the first time. This has happened any number of times. You might remember the NatWest 5. You might remember somebody called Mike Tapper, a whole series of people. And it's one-sided. And that one-sidedness also reflects that it's unjust. I mean, it should never have been the case that Mike Lynch went to America to defend himself for basically 12 months in a trial, which would have ended up with him serving 25 years in prison if the Americans had won, if the American justice had won.